Three. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the AfricaNEV podcast. Today, I'm very excited to introduce my colleague. Her name is Luttah Aluora. She's an environmental planner.
Yeah.
Yes, as well as a moderator of AfricaNEV. So, in other words, she's a colleague of mine. Aluora, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. And how are you?
I'm doing very well. How is COVID-19 treating you?
We're managing, I would say, the best way we can.
Okay, so can you tell us a bit more about yourself? Who is Aluora? What is her interest? And what does she do? What she does?
Okay. I'm referred to as Luttah Aluora. I'm Kenyan, but I work in Togo currently with an NGO. I'm environmental planner by profession. And while in Togo, I'm working as a project manager for Young Volunteers for the Environment. And we handle projects ranging from energy to natural resource conservation to youth eco-citizenship and community development. So these are the fields that I'm working on currently. Yeah.
But how did you get into this whole ecosystem? Because there are a number of interesting inconsistencies for me. First of all, you are Kenyan. Now you happen to be working in Togo. Kenyan is Anglophone. You're in a Francophone country.
Yeah.
And you are in a non-governmental institution that is into basically sustainability. So how did you end up there?
I would say, I think from education to the circles that I was working with in Kenya is what introduced me to this whole world of sustainable development, NGOs and the like. Because while in Kenya, after my studies, I worked with a number of organizations, both private and non-governmental, that were working the field. So I did a little bit of geomapping and remote sensing. I did a little bit of marketing and sensitization. Then I went into intergovernmental organizations, the UN. And then that's where I got to now transition to this other organization. So I would say they all contributed to my being here, and I'm an adventurous person. So I thought it would be a really good experience to see what the other side of the world has to offer.
Okay. So when you started working in JVEs, were you already fluent in French?
No, I didn't know anything. The only basic French I knew was bonjour, and that was that in primary school, like long time ago. So I was really green. But then after I had to learn really fast because our working language is French and English, luckily. So it was kind of a transition.
Okay.
And I had to take time to learn really fast. Yeah.
Okay. So Aluora, in your own words, this is one of the questions I like asking a lot of people. What is sustainability to you?
Okay. For me, sustainability is action that's lean towards conservation of resources that we have, especially natural resource. And in everything that we do as human beings, we tend to tap into resources that we have in nature. Almost everything that we do, energy, the food that we eat, everything. So how to ensure sustainability is that while we're tapping into these resources, we don't interfere with their production, we don't interfere with nature, and we don't deprive as well other people. So which means that these resources have to also reach other people equally. So this is what sustainability is.
So is that relevant to Africa? Well, is another question I like asking, because as you are well aware, we are not rich. Most of our people are in survival mode. So why is sustainability relevant to us?
Well, your statement, I don't agree totally with it, because it is a known fact that Africa is a rich continent.
Okay.
So we are rich.
Rich in resources, but not in cash.
Exactly.
I would say
we just have wasted that opportunity, or rather we haven't tapped well into our resources to transform that into monetary form, I would think. But then we're rich in resources, yet our people are starving, yet our people are, languishing in poverty, which is really a pity situation. So yeah, I've even lost track of your question, but then.
Okay, now let's get to the meat of the matter. One of the areas that you speak about a lot is agroecology. I can see that it's one of your passions, agroecology. You talk about agroecology, you talk about climate change. Well, how relevant is it for us? And if you can link that to employment and job creation for us in your work at JV also.
Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, my work involves various dimensions, and agroecology falls under the part where we work on natural resource conservation. So agroecology is one of the practices or approaches that enables farmers, and as Africa, we're mostly into agriculture, as agriculture is one of our main economic activities. So this agroecology is a practice, it's an approach into sustainable agriculture. So it's also a science, it's a movement now. It's become also a movement. It's a practice, yeah. So it's all about working with nature to produce food. Working with nature to produce food means that we respect the environment, no chemicals or polluting substances that are used as inputs in the farms. We work with farmers and local cultures, local seeds and traditions. We support these farmers to, continue to practice their cultural habits and their cultural practices that's mostly protected and conserved natural environments and ecosystems. So this kind of agriculture that also takes consciousness of the biodiversity and the resources that we already have in nature. This is the kind of practices that we call agroecology. Yeah.
I mean, I want us to unpack that a bit. So let's say I'm a farmer, or I'm representing one of the farmers your organization works with. What is different? What would be different, practically speaking, between what I do before being introduced to agroecology and what I would do after? Because from your earlier submission, I have the distinct impression that maybe certain chemicals that are used for fertilizer, I may not have to use it. If that is the case, how can I improve my yield? I mean, questions like that come up.
Yeah, it's normal because currently we see that most of the agricultural practices are tending into what we would call modern agriculture and industrialized agriculture as well. So the problem with this system is that it was introduced way back and has slowly eaten into the local forms of agriculture, the traditional practices and culture of people. And by slowly eating into this local practices, the people have lost their useful and sustainable practices. Ecosystems have been destroyed by these practices because I would give an example. For the industrial agriculture, it mostly promotes monocropping. And monocropping means that farmers have to sell their land, their huge tracts of land, so that, you know, one type of plants can be produced. Yes?
As killed.
If it's cotton, if it's maize, and where does this maize go to? Most of it is exported out of Africa, and the same communities that sold this land or are affected by this kind of practice are dying of famine and hunger, you see? So
Really?
agroecology, yes, agroecology brings back the farmers' rights to land. So we put that on the table and want to discuss it. Bring back their rights to own seed, because right now we've seen governments, how do you say, like they refuse the farmers to use their own seeds, but then propose genetically modified seeds,
Okay.
saying that it would yield more. But the problem is, after a while, these seeds are no more useful. They don't. They would probably produce more in the first round, but they would hugely degrade the soil because of the amount of chemicals that they would need to grow them. They would degrade the biodiversity in the areas, because you can imagine, with the chemicals and with the kind of practice that is needed.
Alters the nutrient structure, the chemicals in the soil.
Exactly. It destroys that. And because the ecosystem is a relation of different organisms, which will be destroyed. So you can imagine.
So basically, you're upsetting the balance.
Exactly. It upsets the balance. And this is how it links to climate change as well, you see. So more land is needed for monocropping. Forests are being cut away. A lot of deforestation to gain land for farming. Farmers are losing their lands. They're remaining hungry. We are losing biodiversity. Resources are being wasted because with industrial farming, there's also a high rate of food processing. You see, so all that.
But isn't food processing generally a good thing?
Sorry, you say?
Food processing.
Yes.
Isn't it generally a good thing? Because Ghana, for example, I think a lot of the food we produce gets wasted either on the farms or in transit. Okay, so it's some ridiculous number. Almost half of the food we produce gets spoiled on the farm. Okay. So, from my context, one of the things that I realized whenever I talk to the agricultural people is that food processing and food conservation is hugely beneficial. But from your submission, it seems that it is rather non-beneficial. Can you please clarify that for me?
Okay. By food processing, I would mean that the monocrops that are being produced, they are taken through various processing so that they improve their shelf life. And through this various processing means input in various chemicals, high levels of chemicals, sometimes even destroying the nutritive values of the food, you see?
Okay.
So at the end product you get, they could say, yes, this is flour, but is it really flour? So you see, in a way, we are like exchanging what we have. That does not discredit the fact that, yes, we can practice other means of food conservation and processing. locally. And this is why with agroecology, we promote local production and local consumption. This means that we consume basically what we produce. Yes, exactly. That is one. So we don't have to really worry about the 100 years that food has to stay. And plus, agroecological system works with in a cyclic manner, meaning that there is no waste. There is no waste. So all the inputs, even the farm waste that are produced, they find a way back into the system. Yes, either by composting, either by new products that can be used, that can be sold, that can find new new purposes in the lives of the people. Yes. So what we are really against, we are not against food conservation, but there are techniques for conservation that we promote and that have been traditionally practiced over the years. Like our great-grandfathers used certain methods to conserve their seeds and conserve their farm produce. Why don't we tap into this indigenous knowledge so that we can also apply it today? So this is the link that agroecology brings. That linkage where we look into the back, our culture, our traditions. What did they used to do? And without using this amount of chemicals, and what are we doing now to bring that together?
Okay, I will agree that from my observation, and that a lot of the diseases that we have currently are a function of the sort of foods we are eating, which is full of a lot of chemicals, and the quality of the air we are breathing. So you know, a lot of African, well, at least Ghana, for example, we now have lifestyle diseases, which is basically that diseases caused by the food we are eating and the air we are breathing and the way we handle our bodies. However, from your submission, two words become paramount to me. But based on the submission, it seems that agroecology is a very good thing. But the two words that came to mind is relevance and productivity. Okay. Productivity, because I know that most of the nations of the world that feed themselves are able to feed themselves use industrial agriculture, number one. And number two, number two is very, very important, which is relevancy, because all of a sudden our continent, our population is exploding. We are giving birth like ducks. Okay. Then number two, we are also urbanizing. So the concept of growing what you eat, a major city like Kinshasa, Nairobi, Lomé, Accra, Lagos, obviously cannot feed itself by the food it grows within the city limits. Okay, so how does that parlay, this growing what you eat, how does it parlay into the demographic change that we are experiencing, where most of our people are increasingly living in cities? Because in the olden days, where our fathers were practicing this agroecology, like my forefathers, they were fishermen. So they can go to the lagoon or the sea, fish. Their neighbors are farmers. They can just trade. It works easily. But the logistical challenge is nothing compared to what we are increasingly facing now.
Well, I get your concern. And I think this is a question that many have got to ask. Can agroecology feed Africa? Can agroecology feed our people? And the answer is yes, because which one would you prefer? Die of cancer and all those diseases, as you say, or have natural, organic, and healthier foods to eat? Which one would you choose, you see? And too frequently, the the corporate food system has had negative impacts on the people's health. So we do understand that for them, it's more economic value than what's the health of the people, the health of the environment, the well-being of the family and the farmers. Yeah. So agroecology is recognized to both as both mitigating and, you know, an adaptation strategy to climate change, first of all. And as I mentioned earlier, it recognizes the value that farmers have in this country. So production will only increase if we restore the health of the soil and the ecosystems. Yeah, production will only increase if we work with nature. If we work with nature, if we learn to know what nature is communicating to us so that we produce the food that is needed. If we work with the different local situations, because we cannot produce maize everywhere, but certainly it can grow in other places better than others. So how do we maximize? Today, as we speak, we're eating, right? And we have agricultural produce that is being sent to us, but not all of us are growing food. So they're coming from somewhere. Okay. And in Africa, luckily, we still have some sort of, I don't know how we can call it, but we can still access locally grown organic, or even if it's chemical, but locally grown foods. So meaning that our farmers are still producing foods and vegetables and, you know, agricultural produce that we can still use at a raw state. So which is a good thing. So how do we get these farmers to transform their farm, to transition into a more sustainable system? So the land is there, but then how do we make better use of this land? And then another thing is that with this agroecology system, as I said earlier, it covers a wide range straight from production to consumption. It's a whole system. So it means you produce in a sane kind of situation. It is transformed or processed in a sane kind of conditions, and also the consumption is same. So it provides an opportunity, a wide range of opportunity for employment to our young people, you see, because our urban cities, they're filled with young people who are, unfortunately, yes, employment is still an issue in Africa and in many other parts of the world. So agroecology, all the line of production and consumption, there's a lot that young people can do to enhance green entrepreneurship. So I'm thinking it's an opportunity for Africa, for farmers to learn how to produce good food that will promote health, despite the fact that the population is increasing. How can we channel this to feed Africans? We are producing enough food, but in the news you will hear of the amount of wastes. So whose fault is that? And
but is that
also
not
the amount of exports that we have. I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad thing, but then how are we benefiting our own population? How are we benefiting the communities that are suffering to produce these kinds of foods?
okay? What you were talking about, the waste, is that not a function of our organizational systems, as in the dysfunction? Like, but then I'm talking about maybe our political systems, our the whole ecosystem of agriculture, from the farm, yes, how we transport the goods, how we take it to the market, how we preserve it. How is that not a function of that rather than of how the food is produced itself.
Mm-hmm. You know what, Gad, unfortunately, our political systems have not helped much because they've been a promoter for industrial agriculture. Yes, it's very unfortunate. It's very unfortunate that we're still living in an era where our leaders are more economic centric, I would say,
Okay.
and it's at the price of the livelihoods of their own people. So this is it's a big issue, and we've actually been fighting. As I said, agroecology, it's also a movement. So various non-governmental organizations and civil society organization and farmer groups have come together to create a movement, an agroecology movement. We have networks that are backing us, like the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa. We have African Biodiversity Network. You know, these kinds of networks that educate communities and farmers, but also advocate for the right policies. Recently, for example, I would congratulate the Ministry of Agriculture in Togo because they actually banned all glyphosate contains chemicals. All glyphosate farm inputs have been banned in Togo.
Or what?
Glyphosate. You know, glyphosate is the one of the chemicals that they use in fertilizers and yeah, and
it's a
pesticides.
fertilizer. It's a fertilizer.
Yeah.
That has been banned. Why? What is the disadvantage?
You know, it's chemical that has been very controversial, and for the organizations like the companies like Monsanto, because they use it and has been proved to be dangerous to the health system. It has been proved as one of the components that enhances cancer risk. Also destroys the soil health, destroys the ecosystem, kills good bacteria, like all this list of harm that it causes to the environment directly and indirectly. So you can imagine the people in the community who are inhaling this, and after this food will be sold to the market and people will eat these chemicals. So Togo has just managed to ban that, and we're working into looking at how we can actually put now that law into implementation. And it's a long road ahead, but we're working really hard to see that it gets implemented. So when policies are not with the local people, with the local farmers, it becomes a whole other issue.
That's good.
Yeah, it becomes very difficult because they, if there are no legislation to restrict these chemicals coming into our country, restricts the international and foreign companies from coming to mislead our farmers and mislead our communities with GMO seeds that will kill off all other crops and all other plants in the field, GMO seeds that will promise bumper harvest, but then in the end they cannot grow anything else in their farms. We can't win if we do not have legislation, if we do not have policies, then we cannot win. So we are always asking our leaders for good policies that promote agroecology. And actually we have a campaign, an ongoing campaign for agroecology for climate. And this campaign brings together various actors across Africa to put forward the idea of agroecology. So we're not only talking about agriculture, we want agroecology. So agriculture is it's not enough to say agriculture because that can infiltrate other ideas. So it's agroecology as the only form of agriculture that is well-rounded, holistic, and cares for the health of the communities and can help us battle climate change as well.
Okay, I think that this submission, I can sense the voice of frustration when it comes to policy. So I don't want us to go there. That's a rabbit hole. However, I wanted to ask you, practically on the ground, in your interactions with the farmers,
Yes.
how have been their response? I mean, how easy is it to get this whole concept across to them? And after they understand, if they do, what has been their response? Has it been what you expected, or it has not been?
Yeah, we have been carrying out a lot of sensitization and education. I'm sorry, can you hear me from the background noise?
Oh, I can hear you clearly.
Okay, good. So we've been doing a lot of sensitization and education, even training to the practices, because you cannot tell someone or the farmers in the local to stop using this, stop this without providing alternatives. So what we've been doing is that we have been training the local farmers and accompanying them in learning, for example, how to produce organic natural fertilizer using various products that they can easily find in their own farms. So it's
Which will be
various
cheaper for
techniques
them.
like bokashi. Yeah. So how to produce bokashi? So it's a good fertilizer that can be used, and they are really appreciative of these techniques, and it saves them a lot of money that they would have otherwise spent on these chemicals, and they can immediately see the results, because we want them to see what we're talking about, not just talking to them and educating them, but we want them to taste it and see that it actually works. So it's the same thing, which goes back to your question that how can agroecology produce enough food? We teach them, we ask them to do an experiment. One part of their farm, they use for example, this bokashi fertilizer, and all the
Wait. What is that? What is what?
bokashi.
Bokashi. What language is that? you know,
I'm
you know.
not an expert in that, but I know that bokashi it's an organic fertilizer that is made from their local farm wastes and some. It's a mixture. It's a process of how to ferment manure.
Okay, so fermented manure. Okay, got it.
Yes, and after some time they can use it in their farms. And we've already done certain experiments ourselves with JV. We have a Center for Education and Studies in Agroecology who carries out these experiments with comparing organic and chemical farm practices. And we bring the farmers and they see and they go back and try it themselves. And the results, it's very clear. It's very clear and distinct. And they can see that, if I take care of my soil, if I take care of the environment, if I do this traditional and organic practices, I get healthier produce, I get more quantity, and it's good for me, as compared to the other products. So we sensitize using training. We give them examples. We accompany them. We try also and sensitize the partners and other organizations who can support this. And we're very lucky that some even international organizations are jumping onto the bandwagon. So we hope with time, even our governments and organizations can take on to that and support. Yeah.
So I think two last questions. How has this whole COVID-19 thing impacted the agroecology movement? Is it, as it as do in your opinion, is it accelerating it or it is retrogressing it?
I didn't get your question very well.
I'm saying that with the whole COVID-19, all of a sudden the world economy has come to a halt.
Yes.
If a farmer is on lockdown, obviously he cannot go to the farm and all that. But my question is, after, I mean, we have sort of come out of the whole COVID-19, do you think that some of the observations that and the lessons that have been learned because of this COVID-19 will help accelerate the adoption of agroecology or otherwise? Like, for example, because of this restriction of movement, all of a sudden we are seeing improvements in air quality. So before, what was theory, people are beginning to observe with their own eyes the reality that actually our cars and factories are spewing a lot of noxious fumes into the air. Mm-hmm. We should have an impact when we all start moving about again. It's a similar question I'm asking.
Okay. It's quite interesting, when the COVID-19 cases started coming out, especially in Africa. And even today, you can see how people are rushing left, right to go and look for the herb. I don't know which herb is working. And then this other one, I think they said it's garlic, it's artemisia, it's what? You've seen it. And where do you get these things, these foods? If people have abandoned it for the, chemicals, why don't you run back to chemicals? You see? So it only brings the thing, that realization that we had forgotten how good it is to have natural foods.
And that actually,
health. Yes, exactly. That actually promote our health. We had forgotten the importance of these things. So as an organization, we have actually taken advantage of that to actually push and sensitize people some more, because it's an opportune time. Unfortunately, it's in the middle of the crisis that these things are happening, that people are opening their eyes to see that, oh, okay. So
but it's also the right time for them to hear some of these things. It is also the right time. I think it's also the right time for them to hear, because they are living the experience in the moment.
Exactly. They're living the experience. So when we do the sensitization, we actually hope that it would be a wake-up call for most. And we've seen positive reactions. We can imagine it's from the crisis situation that people are readily accepting it. But we will just wait and see afterwards if the situation will improve, But then we've taken time to educate the people, and we hope that they will adopt these practices, like eating healthy. It's good to also have a kitchen garden, in the back of your house if you can.
You sound like one of our former presidents. Is it well, that backyard garden in every house? How could you feed yourself?
Yeah. It's important. It's important where you can have gardens in schools. We have examples that have actually worked. So the thing is, how do we contribute actively into this whole climate action? It is one small action that counts. I don't have to change the world, but I can change my environment. I can change where I live. I can try and change the people around me. So it's small individual actions, and that consciousness that if I do this, what will be the repercussion to the environment, to climate change? If I'm wasteful, it's all linked. Sustainability is all linked. The energy that I use, if I don't switch off a light, what is the repercussion? If I plant this tree, I do it now, but it would bring benefits to many years to come, isn't it? So
Yeah.
we need to do actions one step at a time. We don't have to save the world, but change your environment, your surroundings.
Okay. I think one last question. All this that you have spoken about, with the Agro-ecology campaign that JB is organizing, takes money. So
Yes.
how I mean, it takes resources, it's time, money, and people. Excuse me. So how do you fund all of this?
How do we fund? Well,
Yeah.
as I said, we're working in networks of various organizations and actors who are working in agroecology. And the networks that I've mentioned earlier, the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa, that is AFSA in short, they work very closely with the Agroecology Fund. The Agroecology Fund also, and also other partners, international and regional. So this is where we get the funding to carry out our activities. We also have the African Biodiversity Network as well, where JV is also a member. And you know, the funding is sourced out as a group. So when we're in a network, it becomes a bit easier to get the resources that we need to carry out these campaigns.
Okay. Aluora, it's been a pleasure introducing you to our audience. I'll be below will be her Twitter handle, so in case you want to get in touch with her for any reason, please check below. If you are not a subscriber, please subscribe, like this video, that's a thumbs up. Thank you very much, Aluora.
Remember to hashtag agroecology for climate.
Okay. I think I will include that. But I'm sure that when they count your Twitter handle,
they can see that, yes.
That. All right.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.